Welcome to Freedom Forest. You've probably guessed by the title of this video that we have bought ourselves a traditional sawmill. And I thought I'd start off by just explaining some of the reasons how that came about. So I recently picked up a load of reclaimed timber, which is a bit wide for what I need it for. It's pretty much 6x2s. And I had the idea that it would be really cool to be able to rip it down the middle and make cladding, something like you can see behind me here. And I've experimented with a chainsaw and using a circular saw. And we were thinking the other day, me and Laurie, that we saw our neighbour and he's actually got something very similar to this, that we see him all day cutting firewood on, pushing through the blade. So I went up to him and asked him, would it be possible if I could get the timber up to him to try and rip it down the middle? And he said he thinks it would, but he'd have to make a guide for it and get a new blade because his blade has lost a few teeth, which would cost about 300 quid. So we decided, why don't we actually have a look for one? It was Laurie's idea actually. And I looked on eBay that night and lo and behold, this was on for only an hour away for us and it had no bids on it. And we managed to pick it up for only £160. So it was quite a bargain really. I'd kind of written off in the past getting some form of sawmill because I'd looked at the modern band saws, which are pretty much the only thing sold now, and they are really expensive. So what you can expect from this video series is following my learning journey into this old-fashioned type of machinery, and we're going to be including calculating what kind of pulley and belt sizes I need to run this, because this is run from belt, like a lot of old machines were. I've been given an old Honda stationary engine, which currently isn't working, so I'm going to be looking into that and getting that up and running. I'm going to be potentially modifying the table to fit an even bigger size blade on here. There's a part at the front here that I believe is missing, which I'm going to have to manufacture. And I'm going to be making a roller guide table that will sit either side here out of timber, which will allow me to push our timber through instead of having to be right here next to the blade, pushing it through by hand. And finally, hopefully making some beautiful timber planks with this. So before we begin looking at the sawmill itself, I thought I'd just show you how this is going to be driven. And basically, there's going to be an engine down here in line with this pulley. And there'll be a belt coming down to here that will go around another pulley attached to a small engine. And I'm going to be having to make a bracket down here somewhere to hold that engine in place. And that engine running will drive the belt, turning this pulley, which will run our sawmill. So this type of saw bench used to be quite popular in the UK actually, and they would commonly be owned by large estates and farmers even. I had quite a bit of land, and one of the beauties of them is they're very portable, so you can lift this by hand, as me and Laurie did, but it's very much easier if you had it kind of on rollers. You could have pulled it along by horses or even tractors and just set it up in the forest, for example, where they were commonly used to cut planks. So this here is the guide that moves up and down, and it moves left and right. I can undo this bolt and we can slide this along. So in time, I may well attach another piece of wood to this, just to kind of make the guide a bit longer, or I possibly may even remove it fully and make my own guide. So this is our pulley wheel which will be driven by our belt from the engine, and this has got 3 V-belt slots in it. And there's also this safety guard which comes above the blade like that to stop you accidentally falling into the blade, although I don't know if it would do the job that well, to be honest with you. And as for our blade, this is a tungsten carbide tipped steel blade which is 24 inches in diameter. In my research looking at other saw benches like this online and for sale, a lot of them actually don't have any kind of flat table here at all. You literally just have the blade kind of in a void on its shaft. The nice thing about this one is it does have the nice solid table, and it also has this wooden insert here which is removable. And one of the beauties of this, my neighbour was telling me that basically it can stop the blade kind of chattering left and right. Sometimes with certain types of wood, he said they can actually, the blade will follow the grain of the wood. So having this quite tightly closed to the blade here will stop a bit of that movement. I am going to be removing this and making a new one though, because there is slight bit of wear along the edges here. I'm not really an expert in metals, but I believe this to be made of angle iron. But if you think otherwise, please let me know in the comments below. And looking under the sawmill, you can see it's actually a really simple design. You just have this shaft which runs all the way to the blade over there, held in place by 2 removable, quite industrial bearings, which is great news because they're easy to replace there, simply by bolting them off if I ever need to replace them. And the blade is very simple to remove. It just has a locator plate and a bolt that runs through into the shaft, and you simply just block off the blade with a bit of wood to hold it solid, and then you can crack that nut to remove it. I'm going to start off now by removing the wooden insert around the blade here and the blade, which will allow me to really get in there to give everything a good clean and measure our blade for definite so I know what we're working with. Right, so I'm just going to measure the blade diameter now, and that is 24 inches. So one of the reasons why knowing our blade diameter is very important is because it's going to determine what size pulleys I use. And there's a really good online calculator I found, which I'll show you later, which from my blade size will allow us to calculate the pulley size I need on the engine, because we've already got 1 pulley here, so I'll be measuring this, and it also lets us know the belt size we're going to need as well. So now our blade's off, you can see we've got our central shaft hole here to fit the blade and a locator hole which corresponds with this fixing plate here, which fixes onto the shaft with a locator underneath. So I'm obviously hoping that this blade's going to be okay. It looks okay, I've had a look at the teeth, but I think it's going to be hard to tell until we actually get sawing with it. And a new 24-inch blade for one of these is roughly about £230, so it's quite expensive. I'm under here now, cleaning off a lot of the old sawdust and grease off these bearings. They're a bit gunked up under here, but they run fine. So I'm hoping in a minute, through these grease nipples, I'm going to be able to put some fresh grease in here to give them another lease of life. So as part of trying to research and learn a bit more about this type of bench saw, I've ended up looking at some of the history of sawmills, and I thought it'd be quite interesting to share some of what I've learned from that. And that is the way these first started before all the modern kind of mechanical technology. Is people started off literally sawing logs down by hand, and it's kind of like the earliest form of reciprocating saw. You'd often have one man on top with really long saws like this, not only felling the trees, but also up and down, and they were called pit saws. And you'd have the trunk elevated, and so I'm at the top and this was double the length. You might have me down here, someone pushing up like that all the way until you get to the end, and then they would have an axe, and I believe it was called hewed. They would then kind of chop them into neater planks with axes. And then as time moved on and technology progressed, they began fixing these blades and using wind or water mills to actually do the mechanical motion to save human labour. And then later, with the Industrial Revolution and steam power, also came the invention of circular saws, which were much more efficient than the reciprocating saws previously used. And they allowed speeds of 10,000 foot per minute at the edge of the saw, which is the optimum speed for cutting. So I've now greased our bearings, I've given the underneath a good tidy up, I've measured our blade, which is 24 inches, I've measured our pulley, which is 6 inches, so I've got a lot of the information I need now to progress. Please guys, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to make sure you catch the next part of this series. I look forward to catching you next time. Peace and plants.